I'm going to guess that the best place for us to start today is to get an update on the Congress itself and what's happening there and what you see is happening next.
With the Congress, we are very actively working on the recognitions uh, um, for different governments. We prepared and currently are distributing the formal addresses of the Congress to different governments of the world, and would start meeting them a week before Christmas. Some people would still be in office, and we'll do this. We still think that probably the first decision would be made by Ukraine, and expect it to come shortly. Uh, but not yet here, but we think it will arrive shortly. And then it will start rolling. And definitely we are working on the second Congress. In January, our committees would be meeting together, working on the particular legal acts. So a lot of work there. So yeah, things are rolling.
And with the meetings with other countries as far as the recognition goes, I'm assuming that not only are meetings being scheduled, but there's also a lot of background information being exchanged in preparation for those meetings. And I'm curious if you can give us some insight into the kinds of reactions you and the other deputies are hearing from the other countries. I'm assuming the overall reaction is positive, but I'm guessing each country may be asking for different kinds of things as validation that the Congress is a legitimate body representing Russia.
Actually, I would say the acceptance and the take of the foreign governments is way better than the take of the Russian opposition. It's it's our friends, and colleagues are saying, who are you bloody bastards, and why you are doing this, us. The jealousy that we see, it's a lot. But we are moving forward, and actually, there was a great scandal last week in Latvia with our major opposition station, TV Rain, which expressed sympathies during their live shows towards Russian soldiers who are fighting in Ukraine. Obviously, it's an opposition station, so they are against, no doubt, this. They are
Yes.
against the war, but still, they were saying, poor boys, they are not dressed properly. Everything was stolen from them, so we need to help.
Mm.
So to make their life conditions tolerable. And obviously it created, a lot of outrage, obviously in Ukraine, and for a good reason, but also in Latvia where they were hosted, because they were saying, you're saying it's our army and poor boys, but they're going to attack us. And you guys are
Yes.
right now in Latvia, you're no longer in Russia. Guys, sorry, we don't want you anymore here. And they revoked the license and blocked the broadcast of the state. And now all the other Baltic states joined them in this, and they also banned them from broadcasting on their territory. And obviously, it's a very sad situation because it was not an accident, as the TV station guys were saying, it was just an accident, it was slip of the tongue. No, it was not a slip of the tongue. It's their pacifist, humanist approach is like, we need to make everybody happy. But in the situation of war, it's not working. And what I have written to this is, I was saying I have a lot of sympathies to all Russians, including those who are in the military, but when they are on Russian territory and unarmed, as soon as they with arms on some other territory, I have no sympathy because they are part of the military crimes. And for those people, it's actually a salvation. to be poor, poorly dressed, and hungry and cold, because that maybe would inspire them to put down the arms and to move away. And by the way, that would save their lives, because we were just from the front lines, and I can tell you, each Ukrainian hero which perishes on Ukrainian side takes with him 10 Russian.
Mm.
So by telling Russian soldiers to go away, we actually saving Russian way more than
Yes.
Ukraine. And if you are so humanist, and if you want to think about Russian lives, you should campaign for them to be unequipped, and campaign them to defect, and to flee away.
Well, and Ukraine is actually a very successful campaign to communicate directly to Russian soldiers that it's in their best interest and will probably save their lives to just surrender to Ukraine, and they will be treated humanely. Is that a campaign still
I
ongoing?
Yeah, it's ongoing, and it's ongoing indeed, pretty successfully. Actually, right now, Ukraine has a certain problem, because there are so many of defected soldiers
Mhm.
that Ukraine doesn't know where to put them. And Ukraine is running changes and exchanges and exchanges, with Russia every week. There are dozens of people who are put on the exchange, so that Ukraine wants them out. Uh, there's nowhere to keep them. And our Legion of Free Russians was getting inflow by some of those soldiers who decide not, just to resign, but they understand that they were involved against their will and against their knowledge, to a treacherous and criminal war. And they also want certain revenge.
So let's talk about other opposition groups who, as you said, jealous progress the Congress. I think we know largely who these groups are. I'm wondering, do you see a point in the near future where leaders, your group, and those groups can begin to collaborate so that there's competition on the side of opposition? There's a line to focus on the real enemy, which is Putin and his regime?
What you're saying is exactly my position. I think that we collaborate, and I don't take any of our colleagues in the opposition as a enemy or even a competitor.
Yes.
We have to fight against a common enemy. And then, for example, me personally, I'm not planning to run to any office. We are planning to drive through the transition period, and then free elections, and then whoever will be elected. But I think it's actually essential that the people who are creating the transitional period, that they are not going to be part of the political life after that, because that means that they would make neutral rules, not in their own
Yes.
favor. Uh, and that's my take. But unfortunately, again, politics is a very competitive type of sport, and everybody, firstly, nobody believes in it, and secondly, everybody wants, the great victor, and so everybody is competing to this title, and it's very hard to convince others that let's work together. But we still try.
Mm. Are there conversations happening between these different groups, or is it not even possible to channel conversations at this point?
Well, some people are talking to each other, some are not. In general, people tend to talk when they don't see each other as competitors.
Yeah.
Uh, and say uh, Gary Kasparov and Alexei Navalny are separately talking to Khodorkovsky, but they're not talking to each other. Uh, we are very actively talking to Khodorkovsky, but it's a lot of ice between us and Garry Kasparov, and Navalny folks generally hate us. So it's very, complicated, triangles, quadrants, So it's a love and hate story. But still, my position is that I'm trying to be, in this regards, as formal as possible. We said we are about those who were elected. Doesn't matter for us on which ticket they were elected. We are totally open. We just need to agree with certain principles, but these principles are written in the way that they definitely agree with. Nobody is debating it with us about those principles. The principles basically separate us from United Russia, from Putin. But in other sense, nobody is debating. So we're open, and they say, okay, you have deputies, you just come, you create your faction, you may dominate the process. Nobody is capable of restricting you from it. So it's, if you don't want to take part, what can we do?
Yeah.
But
So what's interesting here is it's, the politics is already happening before, even before there's been a formal arrangement or political thing. We can see that, there's politics permeates everything, right? But one of the things I want to explore with you a little bit, because you talk about this in the book, is that it's not like you and Garry Kasparov or Navalny or certainly Khodorkovsky, it's not like you're not all well known to each other. You all have been working together and perhaps sometimes opposing each other for years and years and years.
No, absolutely. No, it's a question. It's a question of different periods of time. Different people take each other differently. As for example, I was inviting Navalny in my party where I was part of to be one of the leaders of the electoral list of that party. So formally above me, but I thought at that time it was very much useful. I was inviting him, and we were friends for a long time. I convinced everybody that we should do it. Turn this proposition down because he wanted to come only if he would have the guarantee that he would be nominated for the president on the party list. But the party was not ready to do.
Yes.
And he didn't take the offer. With Garry, we were just friends for a very long time. But then when we started doing armed resistance, because he is not willing to join armed resistance, he's cautious by his character. But at the same time, that was kind of taking out the position of the most radical person. Because I'm as a member of parliament, I was never, that visibly radical as was him. Because, in parliament, you always about compromises, alliances, and groups and whatever. You have to be respectable, right? And he is a free radical, could do like whatever he wants. So didn't want to give up that position. So he started resisting. But with Khodorkovsky, we were always friends, and we still are friends.
So perhaps with Khodorkovsky, it's just a matter of finding a middle ground. You're both groups are open to middle ground has not been found yet.
No, I think that with Khodorkovsky, just a matter of optimal pragmatic strategy. Khodorkovsky's main bet is associated with Russian elites. He thinks that it would be maybe not a palace coup, but still it would be a split, and the process of change would be initiated from the elite, from the above. And my main bet is associated with this armed resistance from the bottom. And for him, if he is publicly associated with the resistance from the bottom, it would alienate him from the elites at the above. And it's the same thing for me. If I would be publicly associated with him who is trying to make certain compromises and agreements, it would be bad for people who are fighting with arms because they say no compromise. So we need to keep a connection between each other because at the D-Day, we will see whose bet would actually work. But the other, I think, would just join. Another
Yes.
who would be ahead in this regard.
So in a way, these relationships, everybody's hedging. So it could actually be advantageous for a while for everybody keep pursuing their separate agendas because no one's quite sure which is the right agenda to be successful. Is that a fair assessment?
Between me and Khodorkovsky, yes. Between, say, me and Navalny, probably no. Because there the difference is way more fundamental. Uh, uh, Both myself and Mikhail, we are for the collective leadership. We
Yes.
don't want new tsars. We want genuinely parliamentary republic, and we want a very decentralized state. And Navalny is a very strong leader. He basically wants to replace Putin and to become a better Putin, but nevertheless, stay as the leader of one, strong country.
Yes.
And hold all the power in his hands. And that's a fundamental difference. Obviously, this strategy is not fitting very much with the strategy of the collective leader. It's obviously a competition, but nevertheless, we first need to defeat Putin. That's why I don't see him as an enemy.
Yes.
Yes, it's a person with a different view, and I think that our concept would prevail at the end of the day because we have muscles, we have these armed groups with us. But he thinks that his charisma and his popular appeal would actually secure him his position of united leader. And unfortunately, some of the Western countries are helping him with that. Because it's also easier to say, "Oh, that's one guy we understand, so let's help."
I understand the perception of Navalny in the West. I think he's a seductive character. He's suave. His story is very dramatic and seductive. People inside of Russia feel about
But he has his group of followers, which to me is more like a sect
it.
because it's a very close circle of people. They are extremely loyal to their leader, but at the same time, it's a very close circle of people. They are not open. They are not expanding. And obviously, because of Vladimir Putin's lies and disinformation, he has a very strong negative flavor around him. More than half of the population that have heard of Navalny don't like.
Because
but,
their minds have been poisoned by
Yes. Yeah.
propaganda machine.
Yeah. That's the case. So he obviously needed to be given a floor to have access to a normal TV and whatever to talk about his ideas, to advertise himself. But to me, Navalny, as a part of the legal, normal political process, is not very promising political figure. He is very bright. He is extremely talented populist. But as I said, he is completely unable to create alliance. He is the Trump-style leader. That's probably the closest analogy for the United States. So he's very much on his own way, with no team, but with subordinate.
Yeah.
He has no partner, and he's not willing to get partner. That's why as soon as the political space become more fragmented, and there are plenty of alternatives, his support group would start to dissipate. And I think that he pretty much understands this. That's why he needs to grab the power right away in the moment of change, but he's in jail. And that's why he's
Yes.
not an agent of change. He has to wait for the changes to happen without him and then to intercept the consequences in his favor. And that's what they're trying to do. And that's why they're not making any alliances. For them, it's totally counterproductive.
Right. Well, it is interesting in your vision of a transitional government. The best thing that can happen for anyone who sees themselves as a leader is to support the transitional government and then run for a position of leadership when there's a free and fair election
Yeah.
in about 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. My position is very simple, that this transitional government, revolutionary government, would lay a foundation which would work for everyone. And we are not going to take advantage of this foundation because we are not going to run ourselves.
Yes.
So we prepare this and we step back. The main thing is that the people need to believe that we will step back, because many of them, they just don't believe in it. And I
Yes.
think that's actually the uh, solution, the major thing for the endspurt of this game is to make an agreement, to sign it with blood, that everybody would believe in it. And I think that would actually serve the purpose of the unification of forces. We have an example of this. It happened in Kyrgyzstan not so long time ago. They had exactly this case of Rosa Tunbayeva, lady was formerly one of the most bright representatives of the civil society. She worked with several U.S. foundations, but she was not an active political player, but she was coming to the picture as this transitional president for 2 years with a guarantee that she would not run. That this is a transition after the revolution when, all the political parties would be created, the system would be restarted, the new constitution would start working, and then, all others, they would compete and come to power. And it did work. Actually, it did work.
And you and other leaders that are part of the Congress have obviously already agreed that past this transitional period, your political careers have ended.
Yeah, we did not agree within the Congress as a Congress because Congress is the legislative body and it's large. You cannot tell all the deputies that they should from now on resign and
Mhm.
whatever, but members of the executive council,
I see.
which are doing the management work, the executive thing, we are on very much the same position.
By the way, shameless plug here, but in your book, Does Putin to Die? All of this is explained in detail. I mean,
That's
it's
correct.
incredibly well explained and thought out. So if you haven't got the book yet, I highly recommend it because a lot of the things that Ilya is talking about today will make even more sense, and there will be even more content. And it's even interesting knowing the book and having helped you write it to understand those relationships between, for instance, Khodorkovsky and Navalny and Kasparov and others. It really will give you some historical context to then bring you into the present. I want to ask you about one other thing. You've mentioned many times here today armed resistance. I know you went to the front. You've been talking a lot in TV interviews that you've been holding or being interviewed, a lot on social media about the Legion of Freedom of Russia. Give us some background on that and how that is evolving as the circumstances in Russia and in Ukraine and with the Congress are evolving as well.
Thanks for this question. And I'm sorry, it has to be the last one because we have the executive council of the Congress after that. So, so yeah, the Legion is the military arm currently of the Russian opposition, the main one. It's not the only one. There are other military armed groups in the front lines fighting in Ukraine. But it's the largest one. Altogether, it currently have half thousand people, and it's growing. There's a large large line to join, uh, um, which is almost 10,000 people at the moment. It's a very complex filter to get inside because there are a lot of security and background checks and psychology tests and, all these kind of things. But nevertheless, it's growing. Half of the legion is currently in the front lines at the hottest position next to Bakhmut. That's where the most dense fights are right now. And they're fighting there. They are facing Wagner formations, the private military army of Prigozhin. Yevgeny Prigozhin, one of the most notorious Putin's allies, the most cruel and unfortunately the most effective. But they're fighting really well, and they are very successfully killing a lot of invaders. So half of the legion is right now in training. In general, the idea which is behind the legion is to combine all the Russians who want to fight against Putin, and then make them ready so that they can go into Russia at the end to participate in the revolutionary changes. So they have been trained for urban fights, and that's what's the main inspiration of its member states.
We'll let you go really quickly. I'm just curious to know how the Ukrainians and the Legion members are they able to find a level of trust, or do they tend to keep separate and work separately towards a common goal?
No, it's absolutely blended. Absolutely no problem. The Legion has also Ukrainians inside their ranks because to integrate into the army, all the position, for chief of staff and, these technical things, they have to be, it has to be Ukrainians who know the procedures. That's why it's absolutely no problem. Also, currently Legion is doing the air intelligence with drones for all of the line. So they're sharing the information with other Ukrainian groups which are around them. And also they're doing the artillery support for them and the mines. They are not bad equipped. And so they cover a lot of backs, Ukrainian soldiers. That's why it's not just French. It's absolute unity.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to let you go. Thank you, Ilya.
Thank you very much, guys.
It's great to see you again.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you again next Thursday.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming.